thank you, Kelly, for joining me today on Designing Healthy Environments. We are here with Kelly Adighije. He's Vice President of Bowman US. And Kelly's going to share with us about the road to high performance in building design. What road do we take, Kelly?
Thank you, Alicia, for the opportunity to have a nice kind of conversation with you. I think from Bauman's standpoint, the road to high performance design is kind of like the steps that you would want to take in kind of designing a building for health reasons and also from an energy efficiency standpoint. Basically, we always like to start with the facade of the building. The building envelope usually accounts for about 40% of the energy usage from a building. So rather than just going into systems and improving efficiencies and swapping out new equipment, sometimes we look at what is the facade doing? How is the facade helping condition the interior space? And that's kind of like the first step in our approach. Whatever is passive, things that are don't have mechanical or moving components, what can be done about those first? Are we designing the building to be fit for purpose? Who are going to be the occupants? What are the expectations of the building, for instance? And how is their external environment going to interact with them before we condition with mechanical systems or improved glazing or airflow rates or mechanized ventilation or air change rates and all those kind of buzzwords that some industry professionals are familiar with at this stage.
Right. I mean, you have experience, you have global experience, right? So we can talk about a little bit about that. And I always like to ask, especially with, people that have this global experience, what opportunities there are for us, or, even specifically, we're in Chicago, and then we can talk about the US. Like, what are other countries doing that you see that we may be able to implement that work within our code, right? And what are the challenges in our code right now? And how can we keep pushing that envelope forward, to reach these energy efficiency goals? I'd love to hear that.
Those are very, very good questions. Like you mentioned, I am lucky because I have had a very global experience. So I was very lucky from when I got out of college. I was working at a big prestigious A&E firm, Arup, and we had an office in London, and some of the commercial offices in London actually only had fan core units and big gigantic air systems. So England, high efficiency, not really. It was just bulk standard what you could actually get off the shelf and conditioned space. The good thing about that particular situation is only the commercial spaces were requesting like air conditioning, like cooling of air. Commercial entities were usually just focusing on just the heating process. And maybe during the summer when the temperatures were a little bit milder, then we could have some natural ventilation. But for commercial office reasons, that was never really always the case. Maybe you would have a really ambitious architect with a big atrium, and maybe we could have like some natural ventilation in those kind of spaces. So it was different from here a little bit, but still also similar. Cost was a major issue. In places like Switzerland and in Germany, they had a much further approach to natural ventilation or using passive kind of systems to condition spaces. We had chilled ceilings, chilled beams. We had thermoactive biotile. Basically, they run pipe work through concrete slabs and heat and cool the building in that kind of way, which is the most efficient way possible, because using the entire surface of the floor or the entire surface of the wall or the entire surface of the ceiling, or at least most of it, to condition the space. And that was much more comfortable than what we probably see here in the US. People who always jump the gun and say, oh, Europe is much more energy efficient than the United States.
That's what I wanted to ask you. I said, where do we stand? Like, from your perspective, where do we fall in the spectrum compared to Europe or even, Latin America, right? That you're doing some work there.
That's correct. Yeah. I would say that the US is definitely a little bit behind. I would focus on, I would definitely put my hand up and say, yes, that's correct. However, sometimes the weather conditions in the United States are a little bit more extreme than sometimes what Europe actually has to deal with. So that has to be taken into consideration as well.
Yeah.
You live in Chicago where it can be 95 degrees Fahrenheit during the summer and minus 15, minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit during winter.
Or in the same day.
Yes, exactly. Well, hopefully not such a swing, but
Sometimes.
yeah, exactly. So the US does have a lot of challenges in trying to condition different space. And also every state is different. California is way ahead. New York is way ahead. Some of the other mid states are a little bit behind. So trying to put US in one brush would not be fair. However, I know that passive house is becoming very, very popular in
Yeah.
some areas of the United States. And I'm very glad that that's being pushed through. They're demonstrating that it is feasible, it is conducive to actually apply such principles in certain regions in the United States when it's fit for purpose. Cost is obviously an issue. Everyone is like, oh, it's going to be too expensive. You know, we're not going to do that. It's not going to make the return on investment is going to be poor. Not necessarily the case. I think at Bauman, we always say, try to take emotion out of it. Do your analytics. Let the numbers speak for themselves. Let the knowledge speak for itself. Hopefully some developers like to push the envelope, and we like to work with such developers where it's like, it's not always the tried and tested way. We've seen that there are a lot of failings with that. There's operational issues as well. Pushing the envelope with passive systems. LEED has obviously pushed the boundary a little bit in terms of energy efficiency. You have Live and Building Challenge. You have LEED for Net Zero approaches now. And that's all coming along pretty well, actually. So, and that's actually a really good thing. I think the US is, to summarize, the US is behind, but it is catching up in certain sectors and industries, which is pretty good.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree that there are many of us who are trying to play a little catch up, right? Well, I should say a lot of catch up in my perspective. I think that there's a lot that we could have done over the years, but we're still doing it. We're still doing it, and I think the resources that are out there and the expertise that is out there, we're able to design these buildings that are energy efficient, starting with, I think the beginning to that roadmap is, well, I think it's education,
Okay.
knowing what is out there and who can be a part of a team, right? Because somebody like you, we would engage you very early on, as early as we can, right? To understand once we start looking at um, orientation, massing, all of the site design, then we want to be able to, okay, Kelly, okay, set us straight here. Are we, like you say, ambitious architects? You set us, you add your perspective, your expertise, right? So I think that education piece, along with the client and user, um, is the beginning of a good roadmap.
Totally agree. We have the AIA 2030 challenge, which a lot of architectural firms have signed up for. And it's basically saying for every building that you design, you need to try and calculate or work out the EUI, energy efficiency utilization index of that building so that you can compare it across the board. And a lot of architectural firms like yourselves are, active participants to that program. And it's making architects maybe be a little bit more accountable now in terms of not just aesthetics, but also what is the potential performance of such a building as per design. And engaging with consultants like ourselves. Chicago has a lot of really good consultants. So it's not just Bauman. You have other companies who could help architectural firms come in early and help with massing orientation, what the impacts of certain window to wall ratios are, U value indexes, solar heat gain coefficients, visible light transmission indexes. All of that information is very, very good for architects to know, so that every time you change something, you have an idea of the potential impact of such a change.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have a nice community of, talented people here in the Midwest in Chicago. So I feel I always say that I feel very lucky to be a part of this community and making change, because now we're talking about um, tracking carbon and reducing carbon, right?
That's
Um,
correct.
what what are you guys working on now that would speak to that, to the
From a carbon capture standpoint.
mm-hmm.
So um, we like to dabble in a lot of like conceptual kind of ideologies. So we had a client that approached us about a project down here in Chicago area. It's the Helmut Jahn project that people should be aware of though. Just trying to understand what the life cycle cost assessments would impact would be on changing our delightful Thompson Center into a repurposed and refocused project, and trying to understand, is it better to knock it down totally and calculate the carbon
Is this what's
impacts and
happening
therefore
now? Are you?
it's in the process of being generated from an idea
Yeah.
standpoint. We were working with, I think, Illinois Green Alliance on this just to try and understand what the potential impacts could be.
Mm-hmm.
Knocking the whole building down, or just knocking a certain part of the building and building a tall skyscraper, or just adding a tall skyscraper to it. And basically all these different ideas, what would be the potential carbon impacts on that. So something that we did, I think this was last year before COVID hit, that we were just working on helping our potential clients to try and evaluate what the best strategy moving forward was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Other like carbon capture or carbon analysis projects, basically almost everything that we do has a carbon impact. So we are looking at it from a carbon standpoint. Energy modeling now is kind of evolving into not just the energy usage, but also the potential carbon production or emission from such
Yeah,
processes.
that operational resilience is then, because the building has a life. It has a life.
Correct.
How long will it last? What are its impacts, at the end of life when it does get there, right?
That's true.
So
That's
that's the
true.
whole, I mean, where does this roadmap take us? Is there a cliffhanger at the end, or can we swerve to the right, or what happens with operational resilience?
Good question to ask. One of our projects right now is a hospital in, what's it called? It's failing me. In, not Aruba, not Curacao, it is in St. Martin. So St. Martin had a hurricane that passed through back in 2017 that basically decimated the entire island. And it's changed the whole ideology of everybody living in that island now, the developers and even the government. Everything that's being built now is being built to withstand such a hurricane that they experienced in 2017, because they don't want to have a repeat of what was a very unfortunate circumstance that they had to go through. Resilience, obviously, for an island like that is different from the United States. But like you said, operationally, buildings are supposed to last 50 years to upwards of 80 years. How do you maintain the systems in there, not just the passive systems like your facade, but also your active systems like your equipment, and make sure that they run as efficiently as possible? It's all up in the air right now, and people are focusing on those, especially with energy prices, energy costs fluctuating the way they do. Texas is an example with the what happened with their grid situation. And their grid resiliency was obviously exposed, and that caused a lot of heartache and even unfortunately loss of life.
Right, right. Yeah, that is I wonder have you heard anything, well, what's happened there as a
Uh,
result? It's just gone quiet. I mean, we saw the catastrophe and
yeah, there's going to be a political awakening, I'm guessing, in some shape or form. But I'll leave it to the experts. The idea is that Texas, obviously, with its individualized grid, needs to come with a new solution or new weatherization of their particular grid, or join the federal grid and have those kind of like transfers of electricity between those microgrids to avoid such a situation in the future. Um, I think the cost of the impact of that is still actually being calculated right now.
right.
And
Right.
probably in about 2 or 3 or 4 years time, people would really understand what the real impact was.
Yeah, I think for those of us who are in this industry, in the green building industry, I mean, for me, it really, it was a sign that how can we design to be regenerative? This is a huge awakening to be like, look at projects from here on out to make them as regenerative as possible. It's like, what is your opinion on that
Um,
and your approach?
I just think a lot of, as architects, let's be honest, and engineers, we probably only impact a small percentage of buildings because it's a new building or a building going through a major renovation. We have a lot of old building stock. We have a lot of, and that's the majority, 95% of all buildings existing. I think our approach is for people to look within their own buildings, within their own stock, within their own portfolio, and engage consultants like ourselves, like many numerous consultants out there on, okay, let's start from ground zero. What can we do about our individual buildings? How can we run them better? How can we be better? How can we be much more focused on reducing our energy impact, our carbon impact? And start from that grassroots level. Because as architects and engineers, we are obviously there in the community and we can provide knowledge and feedback to building owners. Building owners just have to feel empowered to engage us and to say, hey guys, this is your expertise. What are your thoughts here? What are your perspectives? Where do you think we can make the most bang for our buck?
I like that. It reminds me of somebody who goes to the doctor or a nutritionist, right? You have diabetes and you see this doctor, you see this professional says, okay, let's look at your eating habits. Let's look at your sugar intake, so you're analyzing this existing building, right?
Correct.
That has operated in such a way. And now you're, tracking and changing behaviors, right? Of operations. So you're like, doctor, can I call you doctor now?
I'm glad that you brought that up actually, because I remember when I was back in the UK many, many years ago, and I had to give a talk to children in high school to explain to them what a commissioning agent does or what the different parts of the built environment specialists do. And I always equated back to the human body. So an architect is basically designing the human body, how it looks, what color of skin it has, where the eyes are located, how the ears are kind of connected. And then that's what the architect does, is the form, the shape. Then obviously you have a form and a shape. How do we keep that thing standing up? How do we make it move? How do we make it resilient? How do we make it strong? That's where the structural engineer comes into play. Structural engineer is basically responsible for keeping that nice form that the architect has created in place and over the test of time, depending on whatever external conditions happen, exterior, like hurricanes, rainfall, etc. Mechanical engineer is basically making sure that the ventilation, what goes in, comes out from an air or water standpoint. The plumbing engineer is basically making sure that whatever gets consumed gets extracted in a logical and an efficient kind of way. The electrical engineer is making sure that everything connects to each other. Your eyes connect to the legs, the nervous system, the brain. And the commissioning agent is basically your doctor. Your doctor that comes in once in a while and checks to make sure that the architecture, the structural, the electrical, the mechanical, the plumbing, and all of this ancillary services are still communicating as per the design in the beginning when it was first conceptualized how this building was supposed to operate. And that's kind of like the analogy that I've always taken in my 16, 17 years of experience now, in terms of what the role of all the different experts are. And us as commissioning agents, we like to see our role as the doctor, as you mentioned.
Nice. Yeah. Because we ultimately we like to I like to design buildings that are simply good for your health, right? That's why that's why we call this designing healthy environments. And what does it healthy for you, healthy for the environment in which we're impacting, and then what is that ripple effect, right? And healthy, and now that we've been in this pandemic and we're still working from home, right? What does that do to our health, our mental health, our physical health? So we really focus on so many, these collaborative components of, how a building comes together, how in those impacts, right? And those benefits. So I'm curious too, like I don't think we don't know what the future of work is. Are we going back to work, and what is the future of the workplace, healthcare, education? What are you guys doing in terms of how we may be a mix of work from home? How do we keep our buildings energy efficient, running healthy when in this way?
It's a very, very good question. Obviously, everyone is hearing about the healthy building standard that is kind of becoming even much more popular now. I think the air quality within buildings is something that people are now envisaging or like reimagining also in terms of maybe air change rates or the filtration rates as well. MERV 13 filters are being talked about, ionization also to kind of stop bacterial growth and viruses kind of transmission. I agree with you that there's going to be a hybrid system of people working from home and people working in commercial offices, which I hope makes people reevaluate also the residential market in terms of we are spending a lot more time maybe at home now than we were in the past, because rather than going to the office or staying at home, maybe natural ventilation is something that people need to focus on a little bit more. Fresh air, outdoor air into spaces, how that gets, where that even gets, how that even enters into the space that you're in, how it gets exhausted are things that people should now maybe be considering. A lot of townhomes have exhaust grills on the floor that trap a lot of dirt. Maybe that's the time now to look at the placement of some of these air distribution systems, and how what was always norm in the past should probably be reevaluated now. Basically, I'm a big proponent for natural ventilation wherever possible. The outside air, as long as it's not in the middle of a road with a lot of contaminants, is always something that we should always enjoy. Bringing as much light and fresh air into a building is something that I would always push for. Trying to do that in a natural way using stratification, which is a natural phenomenon, rather than mechanized fan systems, I would also advocate all the time.
Going back to passive.
Exactly, going back to passive. Basically, as long as the outdoor conditions allow for that, then it should be a media or a medium of actually trying to achieve that.
So passive, and then we go, and then if that's not, readily feasible, I talk about where I grew up. I grew up in a neighborhood where it was there were toxic fumes, around the residences, right? And I remember distinctly I ran track and field, and in our practice, we ran and practiced amongst these very powerful fumes. And luckily, I never experienced health issues, but many others did, right? But it's like in that case, what do you do? Like whether you're working in that environment, you have your office, so then you look at the indoor air quality and filtration, right?
Yeah. In that situation, obviously, you have, like in major cities, the outdoor air is just not conducive, it's not healthy enough. So then that's when in a building, this is where the engineering comes in, like the right kind of filtration, the right location of your outdoor air intakes also, recirculation as much as possible of the air. Make sure you're still bringing in enough outdoor air for hygienic reasons, but then maybe limiting that just to enough air for oxygenation of our bodies, but making sure that the internal air is filtered quite regularly and quite constantly and at a very high level, and also making sure that those filters are actually interchanged when they get clogged up, and you don't want to be transferring bad air within the building. You've heard of sick building syndrome, which everyone has probably heard of though. So that's another aspect, but also about the maintenance and operational practices that we have within buildings that people probably have to pay a little bit more attention to right now.
Mm-hmm. So another question I have, there's the stretch code, right, that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on that? Have you guys like, give me your opinion on the stretch code in Chicago?
I hear that buzzword being banded around all the time by Illinois Green Alliance, and they obviously trying to push the needle. Everything's on code, 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 and in some instances there should be incentives to actually do better than code. Move the needle a little bit. I know everyone's always talking about costs, but I'm a big advocate for it. I actually think code compliance should even be like, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do better than code. I'm going to do a little bit more than code. That should
And
be
I think
everyone's
that's what we
internal thing.
do. I think that's what we do. I mean, code, it's a base where, it's the bare minimums, the bare bones, right?
Correct.
So we are pushing the envelope slightly, slowly, but surely,
Yeah.
carving away.
But I do wish that somehow the local governments could actually, how do I say, give engineers or architects like yourself a little bit more of an incentive to actually push the codes even further. I don't know how that was going to come out or how that's going to shape out, but it should be, and it should be really much more incentivized than it probably is right now, in my opinion.
Well, I think that there's creative ways to dangle something in front of the engineers and architects, and those are
Mm-hmm.
called awards.
That's true.
Right? Recognition of performing and showing that, you know what, we did this. We did this.
True.
And what were
True,
you
but the money side, the developers, they have to be incentivized as well.
as well? Yeah, true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they are the ones who usually fund a lot of these projects in the beginning. The engineers and the architects bring the knowledge and experience to help deliver the vision of a developer or any community or any organization is actually looking at building stock. And they should definitely be incentivized. I know certifications like LEED or WELL, great from a prestige standpoint, and also will it result sometimes in much better rental opportunities for such buildings. But I also think sometimes developers should just be lauded or applauded and said, these guys are doing it the right way. It's not always about the bottom line in terms of what the profitability is
Mm-hmm.
at the onset, but it's about the vision and the mentality and the application that they have in trying to push the boundaries and provide better, healthy environments for where technically their constituents are going to be spending a lot of the time in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's recognition, and I think there's also seeing more developers you know getting on, being motivated to build these types of projects. The pandemic has pushed us in this direction, right? Because again, what is our future in the workplace? We want to fill the buildings, but how do we fill them? So we have to be innovative. We have to be innovative with our efficiency goals and our aesthetic goals. But ultimately it's about, for me, it's about bringing those carbon emissions down.
Yeah.
You can have beauty and without compromising budget, little to no compromise. I feel that we can.
I totally agree. I think in the past, there's always been that emotional element where people are like, oh, this is just going to cost a little bit more. We don't have the bandwidth. We really don't want to push the boundaries because we're worried about bottom lines. And I do think that some early adopters and definitely some developers, especially in the Chicago area here, are thinking past that now. Their mindset is changing, especially after the onset of COVID. It's a lot more in focus on, hey, if we're going to spend a lot of time in these buildings, let's design them so that people are healthy here and people don't get sick from staying in a building that we designed or we developed.
And that there's data, there's always been data, growing number of data of, if you're in a place where you are happy, you want to go to, then you perform better, right?
Correct.
And if you perform better, then your company does better, or your healthy rates are higher and your testing rates are higher. So So there's that data.
That is now beyond disrepute. It is absolutely out there now. Healthier buildings have healthier individuals, who produce a lot better productivity, have a better work-life balance, and it's a benefit for everyone in that situation. We spend what, 70-80% of our time in buildings.
Well,
So
90%, but during COVID, it's what, 99?
99%. Yeah. So it's important that that environment has to be a proponent for promoting healthy living as well.
Yeah. Kelly, what inspired you to get into this field? Well, why are you doing this, Kelly?
Why am I doing this? Well, I'll be honest with you, my own background is weird. Coming from a West African background, my parents said I was going to become a medical doctor, and no one even talked about engineering. Yeah. True, but you see, medical doctors, I always wanted to kind of help. I know it sounds very cliche, but where is your contribution? Where is your impact? How are you making things better? And initially I was supposed to get into medical school. And when I decided to go into engineering, because I did like the physicality of things working together, I fell into sustainability and energy efficiency. 15 years ago, I was just a designer, and I was like, wait, we can do this better. Here's the impact. And architects are happy because they have this unbelievable vision of how things should look. And engineers are on the back end bringing that vision to life while still making it healthy, nice. It's like best of both worlds. You get the aesthetics that everyone's looking for, but at the same time, the people in the background who are saying, okay, hey, we can get this to 95% efficiency. We can do renewable energy here. We can do heat rejection here and use the energy and put it back into a different aspect of the building. We can use lights that kind of connect with the HVAC system. And I'm like, wow, I want to get involved in that. That's like a holistic approach to design. That's a holistic approach to engineering. It's like, do better best. Just do it better than the last time. It's like, how do you refine something and make it better than the way you did it the last time? And that's always been a great passion of mine in everything that I do, basically. And that's now I think I'm into my 17th year now, which is insane when I think about when I started. But I'm enjoying it. I get to go to different parts of the world. I get to help a hospital in St. Martin get developed. I get to help an airport in Aruba get more energy efficient. I get to help a building in Mexico City improve its control systems of its HVAC system and bring its HVAC system into the 21st century. I work on a lot of tenant fit out projects. I work on new builds, hospital projects. Amazing. It's just amazing. I'm glad I ended up in this career path. I think for me, it's been very, very enriching and very, very rewarded. Just internally in my soul, I feel like I'm actually making an impact on people's lives.
Very nice. Well, it is very clear that you are passionate. That this was the most animated answer that I've gotten. Like your face lit up, and this is why I do this, and it's great. You're just as passionate as I am about working in this type of work, right? I enjoy it because I get to see and work with people from all areas of expertise, and just, going back to that medical analogy, you're sitting at the operating table and everybody is like, just, collaborating to make it a success. And a success, to me, I think in the future is if we are, running on renewable energy where we are regenerative, not just speaking of energy, electricity, but also water. I mean, we had the Commissioner Morita join us in our last talk, and amazing things that she is doing with conservation goals at the water reclamation. So it's all connected. I feel I'm so optimistic about what we can do.
I'm super excited. Just like going back to what you said, is everybody's coming in from different aspects of the industry with great new ideas and innovative kind of solutions. You have buildings now that they're going to add like a module to the BMS, and it's going to be predicting, it can get the weather data 3 days in advance and change its set points and its settings within the building in anticipation of what the weather is going to do in the next 3 days, which is great. You know, I mean, it's much more efficiently run than something that's always reactive all the time. This is actually saying, okay, it's going to get to this temperature. I'm going to start making changes with my set points and my conditions so that when we do get to that temperature, it's already at that temperature band internally that it needs to meet. And just ideas like that, grid resiliency, or look at the automotive industry. Look at where we've gone from cars from 20 years ago until now. The building industry is a bit behind, but I do think it's gonna start catching up really, really quickly. So I'm glad everyone is at least focused now on, well, not everyone, but at least a lot of people, a lot more than in the past, is focused on building things better, raising the boundary a little bit. It might be small steps for some, but it's heading in the right direction, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Lastly, what keeps you inspired? What are you reading? What do you recommend for others to learn about that road, that road to high performance?
I'm actually a fiction guy. I never read nonfiction. It's just weird because I like the escapism of reading. And it just takes my mind and clears my mind. It inspires me in different ways, which I can bring back into my industry. I would basically just say that continue to educate yourself, continue to listen to other people, continue to share perspectives and to hear perspectives from everyone. I like to learn every single day. Every morning when I wake up, I'm like, what is something that I didn't know yesterday that I could actually learn today? And it doesn't matter whether it's even directly impacting my industry or not. It's just information that I'm like, oh, that's actually pretty good. You never know when that information might actually become something that's of more substantive that you can use later on in our industry. So my feedback is basically continue to learn, continue to be open, continue to appreciate everyone's perspectives, even if they don't agree with yours, and continue to have good, healthy relationships with people. And that transpires across the board eventually.
Healthy. I like
that. Healthy. Healthy living.
That is our ethos, designing environments.
It is.
Very well said. Where can people find you? Can we connect with you?
I basically respond to everyone who sends me an email. It's my number one goal. Obviously, I can be found at Bauman Consulting. It's a consultant here in the Chicago, Washington, D.C., or Germany, Frankfurt area. I'm on LinkedIn, Kelly Adighije. My last name is a little bit of a tongue twister. It's West African. I'm from Nigeria originally, but it's Adighije. So it's Kelly Adighije or k.adighije at bauman-us.com. I'm happy to have a conversation about anything energy related or sustainability related with anybody who wants to get in touch.
Thank you so much. So now I know, I learned that the phonetics for Spanish and in Nigeria are very
they are similar.
So our pronunciations are pretty close.
It's not so bad actually. So it's here in America we say Adighije. In Nigerian phonetics, Igbo, my culture, is Adighije. It's how my last Adighije. So it's Kelly Kelechi Adighije.
Adighije. So let's see, in Spanish it would be, have you heard this before? Have people tried to pronounce your name in Spanish?
How would you say it in Spanish then?
Adighije.
Oh, close. The J and the Yota, the J will just be slightly different, but pretty close. Yeah, pretty close.
Is that
pretty close? The J, Adighije. Adighije. Yeah.
I'll probably be reading a book and I won't understand anything, but I'll pronounce it pretty close.
It's perfectly fine. If it's difficult, Kelly is fine as well.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Anytime you want to come back, we'd love to have you back. I'd love to have you back. This was great. And learning, continuing what, innovations take us, because that's what it's about, innovation.
Thank you, Alicia. Always a pleasure. Always happy to come back, and really looking forward to continuing to focus and see what APMonarch's doing. And I've been watching you guys, always watching you guys.
Things, adaptive reuse, carbon reduction. We're excited. I'm very excited about these promising projects.
Speaking my language.
All right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Please, appreciate it. Happy Easter in advance, in arrears, and wish you a wonderful rest of your week.
Same to you. Have a healthy week.
I will.